And actually, Sister Jayanti's fault I'm here. I know this life is predestined somehow, and you're meant to do the things that you're meant to do, but it was 23 years ago in London. I'd just taken the course, and I didn't have any meditation experience whatsoever. My mind was all over the place, and the soul I found sounded boring, and God, I didn't believe in God, karma, no. And then the world cycle, that was interesting, but just no experience whatsoever. And then I thought, okay, let me go try more meditation. And I was sitting at the back of the hall, and people were coming and going a little bit like here, no peace. And I thought, I'm not going for getting up early to sit in a place like that. I thought, let me try one more morning. I went to sit in the front. And then Sister Jayanti came up. I've never seen a sister leading meditation before, so no one told me about Rishi. So I was sitting where you're sitting, and then I saw everyone was looking at her, so I thought, let me also look. I was seeing what the others were doing. So I looked, and then you looked at me, and then I felt so peaceful. First time in my life I experienced peace. I felt, wow, I didn't know it would be like this. Okay, I could sit here forever. And that was the thought I had. I could sit here forever now. And then I had a very strange experience that I've had the feeling that the peace was coming from somewhere up there. It's like through Sister Jayanti. And that was the first time I thought, okay, maybe there is something about this God business. And then I thought, if she can have that connection, why then I should also be able to have that connection. Why only her? That is for me as well. So that's how it happened.
I didn't know.
And so this song was actually a very accurate instrument for peace, and that's Sister Jayanti. And I was thinking about one other thing in the introduction was that Sister Jayanti is coming here for 1.5 weeks, and it's a long time for her. Normally she goes to a place 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, so 1.5 weeks, 12 days. And I asked Sister Jayanti this morning, how come? She said yes to come for so long time before it was very much in the media about this climbing conference. You know, we knew about it here in Copenhagen, but no one wrote about it, no journalists, only the people in that area. And when it wasn't well known, she said yes to come for so long to this. So I think it's a very, Sister Jayanti is like that often, a little bit ahead of time. It's my experience many times. Nearly one step before us. So I thought I knew it was going to be a world who is going to focus on Copenhagen this 1.5 week. And all of us in here have a lot of job to do to spread peace, and people also stress. There's so much work for so long. So we need a lot of peace these days. And finally, I know most of you personally, and that's the topic for tonight is the spirit of service. And I know most of you, and I know in your heart you have a very pure desire to help. I know some of you are choosing a profession where you can help others to feel better. All of you support us in one or another way, with finances or with time or with good wishes, and it's also part of your sort of life to help. And we also know, including me, that sometimes we'd overdo in helping, and it would be better to help yourself than to help the others. And how do you keep the balance? So we thought that was a good topic to start the whole climate conference tonight. Thank you. Everything is set, Robert? Yes. I'll go back and forward a little bit to try and get some air in here. Yes. Thank you.
Om Shanti. Sonia had told me that all of you have been supporting and helping in one way or another. And so firstly, I just wanted to express my thanks to all of you, because sometimes there are big organizations and you can see that there's a lot of external activity that happens. But when it's very quiet and incognito and meditation, then to recognize what is actually happening there and give your time and your energy and your support to that is a lot of insight. So it indicates that all of you have had some awareness of what's going on here to be able then to give your time and energy to support everything. So thank you very much. And yes, I think that it's very important to be able to see, well, what is the spirit of service? And I'll share a little story with you first. I've now been with the Brahma Kumaris 40 plus years, and early days in London, I was in some sort of service situation, and there was a medical person there, and myself and various other people, and we were talking about various ways of serving. And this medical person was very, very dedicated and was doing so much for other people. And about 15 years later, we met again in another similar situation. And this person then told me that they decided to step away for a little while, and they didn't know how long. Maybe it was going to be more than just a little while. And I was curious and I asked, what brought you to that decision? And he said, well, I feel that I've given so much that I've actually created burnout for myself, and I don't think I have anything more left to give to others. And I could see that that is what had happened with him. And I thought of Daddy Jayanti at that moment. And how many of you know Daddy Jayanti? A good number. Well, Daddy Jayanti is now 93, and she's across the other side of the world at Melbourne, attending the World Parliament of Religions. And there too, the subject of climate change has come up in many different panels and plenaries, and I was just reading the news report that's come from Australia about that. And so climate change is very much happening there too, in terms of the interfaith discussions that are going on. And at that time, when this person talked about burnout, and he'd been serving maybe for about 20 years, at that time I thought of Daddy Jayanti. And this was in the 80s, I think. And Daddy'd been serving since the 50s, and she was still going strong. And if you ask me today, how is she, I'd say that she's younger than I ever knew her, and I've known her for 50 years. And the quality of service is, of course, phenomenal, but the quantity of service that she does is also probably more than you and I could cope with on a general timetable. And so what is the difference between, here's a person with a great passion and love to serve, and that's what they're doing from their heart, and here's another person who's also passionate about service and is also doing it from their hearts. And what I realized was that there were two differences between these two individuals. And in this case, one was serving but didn't know how to be able to recharge their own inner battery. And so it was a giving and a giving without the recharging that was needed to fill themselves. And here was Daddy, and Daddy's timetable began with a recharging of the battery every morning, so that then through the day it was possible to be able to give. But also secondly, I also realized something else, and that was, here was this individual who was giving of himself, which on one level is wonderful, it's a great sacrifice. But on another level, where I give of myself, then what am I left with? And so here was Daddy. Yes, she was giving her time and her total attention, but what she had learned to do was to be an instrument. So that when she was giving, it wasn't she that was giving, but she was just simply being an instrument so that then the one above could work through her. And in those days she hadn't talked about it, but afterwards she's commented and said that I'm a great miser. And those of you who know Daddy know she's got such a big and generous heart. And so what does she mean? She says, I'm a great miser. I don't give my own power away. I make sure that I step aside and I let God give His power to whoever it is who's in front of me who needs that power. I conserve my own energy and I keep my power for myself because I know I'm going to be needing it. And so burnout, and here more and more generation of energy, and the soul keeps moving forward and serving in deeper and more significant ways continually. So, what are we doing? Both sides of the picture are pretty clear. When the university started, Brahma Baba told us that there were 4 subjects that we had to study, because it's not a university in the traditional sense, as all of you know, but studying the spiritual dimension, and within that, the 4 subjects were the study of spiritual knowledge, soul and God and karma and the eternal cycle, the connection of religions with each other, all of these subjects. Then the second subject was a subject of meditation, which in another way you could say is that the first subject is to be able to understand, but the second subject is to be able to experience, because it's the meditation that brings me the experience, and through that the validation of the things that I've been hearing about. And so knowledge, and on the basis of knowledge, the meditation, and then beyond that, the practical application of this in my life. When you see transformation happening within yourself, then you know that things are working. If I keep trying to move ahead, and intellectually I'm understanding, and I'm trying to meditate, but I'm not quite making the connection somehow. But the proof that things are on track is that there will be a transformation in my own habits, my own nature, and my own personality. In the sense that the things I know are damaging for myself, I'll be able to see how to deal with them and be able to overcome them. And then the 4th subject, and it's the 4th, it's the subject of service. And so you can see the sequence. And the history of the organization is interesting on another level. When they started, it was in 1937, and through that period, they moved from Hyderabad, which is now Pakistan, into Karachi. At that time it was still a united India. And through that period they observed the upheaval of the world go through the Second World War. They saw India go through its partition and a huge war that happened right there on their doorstep. They were in Karachi and there were rivers of blood flowing outside. And they continued to stay in Karachi, even though the majority of them were Hindus, and it became Muslim Pakistan, of course, but they continued to stay there, and they enjoyed the support of the local community because people saw them as the children of God. They didn't see them as adherents of one particular religion, but that's how they were known, the children of God. And so they were being given support on all levels, official, grassroots, everything. And so they continued to stay there till 1950. So it was a good few years after the partition. And that period of 13 years in Karachi, and then moving to India, the guidance that Brahma Baba was receiving was that it was time to move. And later, of course, Pakistan became a military dictatorship. So history shows that the guidance was right and it was time to move. And they moved to India, and their journey was straight to Mount Abu. A pioneer group had been sent to search for a place, and they'd identified Mount Abu as being the place. The only brief that they'd been given by Baba was, find a place which is far from the eyes of the world. Who's been to Mount Abu from here? A few of you. Well, I hope that those who haven't yet been will have an opportunity to go. And today it's a place where there's 1 million tourists who come every year. But at that time, 1950, it was a population of a few thousand tribal people and a little tiny village. That was it. And then I've seen it grow through the 60s when I first went there. But even today, the population of the village, the town, it's now a town, is just about 5,000. But 1 million people come as tourists. So at that time, literally, it was far away from the eyes of the world. And so they moved there in May 1950, and they continued their period of intense meditation. And a year later, then they started to go to other places in India. They were being invited to go, but that happened. So they had a period of 14 years in which they were actually practicing all the things that they were being taught about the soul, the relationship with God, the quality of relationship and interaction with each other, the transformation of one's own habits and traits. All of this was, and of course they were running their community. Cooking for 5 people is a job in itself, but cooking for 300 and doing the laundry for 300. So just multiply everything that you would do in an ordinary household by a few hundred times, and you get to see that it wasn't just they were sitting down and meditating. It was a pretty full timetable because they were responsible for everything within the community. And they did everything themselves, including driving the bus and washing the bus and putting right. And it was a majority of women, young women at that, who were part of the community. So I don't know many people in India at that time who would let women do the driving and who would have women be the mechanics. So it was quite a pioneering community in many, many different ways. But the main thing was that through that period, yes, they had that timetable of activity, but yet still within that, the community had come together to research into the power of silence and to experiment with the power of silence within themselves and to work with the laboratory of their own mind and bring about transformation within themselves through that. So they had a period of 14 years of what we call tapasya. Tapasya means intense meditation. It has this word fire within it, tap, the fire of yoga, the fire of meditation, which means that that was really the focus. The activity was by the way, but even through the activity, it would be done in that stage of spiritual awareness, soul consciousness, and the interaction with others would again be based on the awareness of soul, seeing soul, soul, speaking to soul, and this would be their conversation also. And it was great that others were of that same interest and quality. If you try that at work, and you could try it on an inner level and see others as souls, but if you say to them, do you know you're a soul? They tell you what? And they'd wonder what you were going to say next. But there being a peer group, they were able to do that. So that was their life. But that period was then the preparation that allowed them then to take up the fourth subject, the subject of service. So they'd had the knowledge, they'd had the time to meditate, they'd had the time to experiment on themselves, and then the results of their experiments were what was being shared in serving others. Well, we don't have that sort of time, do we? And so the conference is beginning tomorrow. And so where we're going to find 14 hours, let alone 14 years to practice meditation, to prepare ourselves. But times have changed, and the essence of the teachings is now available in a way that wasn't at that time. The method of meditation is now so clear that what took them a long time to experiment with and discover today can be explained to you in a very short time, and you can start practicing that in a very short time. So we don't have that sort of time for preparation, but yet it's still important to keep those steps in mind. Let me spend some time in spiritual study, in meditation, in practicing, and then I can do the service that I would like to do without feeling that there is pressure in service, or that service is a bondage, or that service is a burden. Because sometimes we begin very enthusiastically in service, and then as our energy levels come down, then service begins to feel a burden or a pressure. But no, if I keep those steps in mind and I follow those steps, then service was always the sense of amazing fortune and a wonderful experience of learning and growing and being able to gain good wishes and blessings from all. I would say that if there's any one subject that attracted me at first to the Brahma Kumaris, it was the subject of the knowledge of the soul. Just that was so amazing for me. I felt at that time like I was being given a key that could open up all treasures, and I still feel that today, that if I have a question or if I have something that's blocking me that I need to resolve and not allow to get stuck with, I just have to come back to the knowledge of the soul and the understanding of that, the mechanism of what goes on inside the self is so amazing that it can be resolved. So the beauty of the knowledge was what my first interest was. The meditation then happened in a very beautiful way. But then the thought came, this has helped me so much, it would help all the friends I know. That I'd lived in London, then gone to India on a sabbatical, studied this there, and that's when I thought, well, my friends back in London would benefit so much from knowing these things, because I knew that their minds must have been in as much chaos as my mind had been. No problems as such, but just the upheaval that minds go through generally, especially in teenage life, or maybe at any time in one's life. So the thought came, I would like to share these things with them. And so that was the stimulus for service. just that feeling, I would like to share all of this. And since those early years, early days, I think what has kept me very much moving along on this path has been the blessings gained from service. I still love the beauty of the knowledge and the new insights that one comes across continually. Like just this morning, one of the things we were reading, we study every morning together, and in class there was this sentence that captured everybody's attention, and it was that when you reflect on spiritual knowledge, it's through that process of reflection that you begin to experience God's love. Just that statement. And it's something I know, but the way it was put was very beautiful. And again, for me, it provided that very beautiful aspect of understanding knowledge in a different way. That yes, it's through the reflection on truth that you're able to start experiencing God's love, and then even further go into the depth of the ocean of love. So yes, I still love the knowledge and it sustains me, but really what has kept me through is the blessings I've received from service and the amazing opportunities to learn from the fortune of service. And so I know that all of you, like Sonia said, are very much interested in service in some way or another. But 14 years aside or 14 hours aside, a very simple way to again follow a timetable, which is an excellent preparation for service. Start your day by giving yourself the opportunity to have an inner dialogue with yourself and a dialogue with God. And what happens through that process is that my own inner needs are completely met and fulfilled. If that doesn't happen, the battery isn't charged up in the morning, then through the day I'm doing the things I need to do, but the reactions that I'm having are quite different to the ones that I would have if I'd charged myself up in the morning. And also then what happens is that through the day, if I've taken all that I need from one, then very genuinely, whatever it is I do through the day is really in the spirit of being an instrument and allowing the one to work through me, so that there isn't even the sense that I have given, because one of the things that happens in service is I'm giving. Am I giving? I think I'm giving, but that's it. That's the pitfall. I think I am giving. And then I'm reminded that, in fact, what is it that I could possibly give? And so where ego comes in and the thought, I am giving, then there'll also be the need for acknowledgement. There'll also be the need for the recognition. And where I haven't that need, it's where I know that I'm simply an instrument and I'm fulfilled anyway. And so I don't need acknowledgement. I don't need that recognition from outside. I can just simply continue to be an instrument and let the one above do the giving. So very easy for ego to step in, so have to be careful. The other thing that happens is that when I do service, without that awareness of that connection, then I am needy and I think I'm giving, but in fact I'm taking more than I'm giving. It's the situation of codependency in any relationship where a person thinks that the other one needs and so they're there to give. But it's not that they're giving, they're actually wanting to be needed in that. Am I clear? Yeah. Okay. So often where we think that we're doing a service to another, it's not that I'm actually doing service with that motivation of service. It's because I need to be needed. And so again, a very difficult situation in which I become dependent, and there's of course then that subtle bondage that comes up in that. And so service with many labels, but really the way to be free from all those subtle things that can trap us is to begin the day filling myself so that really I begin full. And the second thing, every morning, now invitation to all of you to come here for the morning class, and I know some of you do from time to time, but how often do you need to drink water? How often do you need to give yourself food? And so this also needs the water of God's love and the food of God's knowledge, the nourishment that can give strength to the soul. Let's look at the other side. I don't give myself that opportunity to feed the mind good things with knowledge, with study. I begin the day, and usually what we'll do is turn on the radio or the television or pick up the newspaper, and beginning the day filling my mind with negativity. When was the last time you heard or saw good news? Especially in the short world bulletins that come on the radio or TV in the mornings, or the first page of the newspaper. Good news? It's been a long time since I saw any genuine good news around. And so we are beginning the day feeding the mind with things that are not so healthy. So what's going to be the state of my mind through the rest of the day? It's going to be a struggle. I've started the day feeding myself the wrong food, junk food. And so we know what junk food does to the body. There's not strength, there's no resistance. It's going to cause ill health. Then whether we follow that or not is our own business, but at least we have that information now. But the same thing, what am I feeding myself at the start of the day? So yes, the invitation to come here, but if not, if it's not possible for whatever reason, make time for yourself to read even a short passage of something that's uplifting and enriching and is nourishing for your mind. Whatever text it is you find helpful for you. If it's the thought of the day, I'm sure Sonia has a method to send you messages that are just a simple short thought for the day, or the blessing that comes from the Murali, the lesson that we study, whatever it is. But you may have lots of material at home to read from, but just make time for that nourishment. And so silence, the filling from God, the meditation, and then the study, filling the intellect with truth. so that you're beginning the day with the compass in the right place. Otherwise, the compass is off course at the start of the day. How's it going to guide you? But setting the compass straight with truth, with knowledge, then yes, there's so much service to be done just simply through your thoughts. Maybe, and usually it's family, those who are closest to you, who are the least willing to listen. I discovered that in my own family. And there's a reason for that. They know you too well, and so they want to see change in you. When they see change in you, then they'll say that yes, there must be something in what you're saying. If it's just words, then they're going to be totally dismissive. And so maybe it's not words. Maybe you're just beginning with thoughts, sending out good wishes, whether it's at home, whether it's at work, whether it's with your friends. And yes, maybe there is an opportunity to share a few words of encouragement. I'm not saying give them spiritual teachings, but yes, maybe it's just simply encouragement, or words of comfort, or words of upliftment. Everybody can do with these, and they don't always get them. People come to you with their thoughts, and what is your response to that? Is it to say, oh, come back later, I don't have time now? Or is it, I'm not really interested in this? And maybe you don't say it, but maybe your body language and your vibrations say it. And so the whole process of seeing how one can serve through thoughts, through words, in a way that's acceptable to the other. It can't be that I think I'm serving, but the other finds it unacceptable. It's of no use at all then. But to be able to give something of value that the other one feels is of benefit for them. And then, of course, through actions. Maybe it's the way in which I bring someone a cup of tea. Maybe it's the way in which I just keep my desk very clear and clean and keep my space open so that it's an invitation to others to come and join me. So actions doesn't just mean distributing food or cleaning the floor or things like this. Yes, all of that. But also the things that I do regularly, which are part of my duty, my responsibility, my work, my daily life, the way in which I do all of that can change. And in that case, then, it becomes service. One of the things that I've learned from the Dadis is, if you're doing something, is it worth doing? Well, you should have made that decision before doing it. And so if you're now doing something, it's because you've decided it's worth doing. Then in that case, do it with love. Don't do it superficially. Don't do it half-heartedly. Whatever it is you do it from your heart. Do it with love. And that in itself then becomes service of others. And so service is multifaceted, and service can happen at all times, in every situation. And of course, two things that happen as a result of service immediately. If I've done actions or said words or thoughts, words and deeds, whichever, if it's been in that spirit, then the return that comes back to me immediately is of joy. When you've done something in the right way, whether others have seen it or noticed it or not, never mind. But you feel good about it. Right? And if there's something you've done which isn't of that quality, of that caliber, you're not satisfied with it. Never mind the comments you get from other people, but your own heart tells you that it wasn't quite in the way that it should have been. And so service done in the right spirit immediately brings a return of happiness. But also, it brings blessings from the souls who have been served. They've taken inspiration, they've taken benefit, and so they give you good wishes from their heart. And that's a very, very valuable aspect of life. To be able to win the good wishes of others, to be able to receive God's blessings. And sometimes you call it grace. It's God's grace that came. But grace doesn't come just like that, just by chance. There's something that you've done that allows you to be able to experience blessings, grace, call it what you will. And so service done in the right spirit brings that sort of return. There's lots of other things I could say, but what I want to touch upon now is something else. There's been a whole list of questions that came in, and they come in from one individual, but when I read the questions I felt it was appropriate for all of us, and it's quite a few. So I'll just take up a few maybe because they're more or less in the same theme. What is the best way to manage your own circles, your own dramas in this world of the big drama? What are the key words there, other than meditation? So how do you manage the things that are going on inside of you? Meditation, yes, of course, but the other key word there is introspection, learning to look inside. And I talked about how the key to being able to resolve all situations is to go inside yourself and see what's going on in here. That's absolutely important. Introspection. Another key word would be conversation. Conversation with God. To be able to understand what it is I need to do. How to keep the mind quiet through the working day. Work, activity, busyness. How does quiet fit in? Who knows what traffic control is? Most of you. You can't maybe play music through the day, at least not while you're at work. Or maybe you can, but maybe you can't. But find techniques, tools that will help you have moments of quiet through the day. For example, on your computer, you can get a software that's called Peace Pause. And it'll go bing, and it'll remind you every hour on the hour just to pause for a moment. And if you wish to ignore it, you can just press a button and forget it, never mind. But there can be a technological aid. You can get one of those watches that goes ping, ping every hour. But also, every time you need to give the body some water, some drink, some sustenance, some food. Now that's the time when automatically you stop your work, and even if it's for 30 seconds, you focus on getting the water or whatever. So traffic control. But you can choose it and amend it according to your own situation. Some professionals tell me how between the space of one client or one patient going out and the next one coming in, they take that opportunity just to let the mind be very quiet, and you finish with one chapter before you begin the next chapter. Some people tell me that through the day they have to go from one office to another office, and it happens not just once but several times. Every time you go from this place to that place, time to let the mind become quiet. There's a lovely story that a woman who's an educational psychologist told me recently. She'd been working at this in the US. She'd been working at this school establishment, and she spent several years there. And when it was time for her to leave there, she went to say goodbye to her boss. And he said to her, "In the 4 years that I've known you, you've never walked into my office." And she was very surprised because she used to go to his office regularly, more than once a day. And he went on to say, "Every time you came into my office, you floated in. You never walked in." And she then remembered that in the 30 seconds it used to take from her office to go there, she's a meditator, she used to take that time to just practice going inside and being very quiet. And then she thought, walk in. But what he observed was that she floated into the office. So there's a very practical impact that you can have on others if you practice these very, very simple things that I've shared. But take the opportunity, create the opportunity for those little pauses. How do you deal with people and staff and be efficient and make things move? A lot of our time is wasted in either negative thinking or just thoughts that are irrelevant. They have no relevance to the task on hand, but we don't have the capacity to be able to focus on the task because we haven't trained our minds to do that. Our mind is so accustomed to be letting loose and running wild that we don't know what it is to focus. Well, meditation is excellent training for focus. Traffic control is a great technique to keep focusing again and again. And using all of these methods, when you actually sit down to do your work, you're able to accomplish more within the space of an hour than you would have in a couple of hours without that training for focus. So definitely there's greater efficiency. And if time is equated with money, which it tends to be, then you're saving a huge amount of time, just simply through learning to stay focused and stay on the task that you're meant to be doing. How do you combine spiritual thinking into having the responsibility to care for others, setting up demands, making sure there's an income for everyone? Problems come up. It happens more and more today. People always tell me that the pressures and the demands that arise at work today are far more than they used to be a few years ago or early days. Do you think it's going to get better? What do you think? It's going to get better? Well, the good news is that it isn't going to get better. It isn't. But why I say the good news is that it's what spirituality is teaching us, that the conditions of the world are going that way. And this is why we're looking at an alternative paradigm, coming back to the awareness of the self, so that I can move in a different direction to the way the world is going. I don't need to go the way of the world. Spirituality teaches me to experience upliftment and go in a different direction. And if you're doing the practice of early morning meditation and spiritual study each day, it's a fact. The quality of interaction you have with people at work changes dramatically. People aren't afraid of you anymore. How many bosses create fear in their staff? And what does the fear factor do? Does it make staff more productive, more efficient? Definitely not. But a boss who's supportive and understanding, staff are more cooperative. The efficiency rate is much higher and better. The absence rate drops off because the atmosphere is a much more friendly atmosphere. The boss sets the tone, and a spiritual boss is able to create a different atmosphere and environment, and really be caring and concerned about people. Because when you do that, when you put people first, then their work is that much better than it would have been otherwise. There's a lot of research that's happened to underline this. What to do with people who are very unpleasant and aggressive? Seek out their good qualities. Talk to them about their good qualities. Remind them of those. And what you're doing then is empowering them. If you just simply tell somebody that, you're very rude or you behave very badly, then that's not the way to win their hearts. And they won't respect you. They'll think you have some other motive in being nasty to them. But if you've won their trust and their friendship, and then you make some suggestions to them, they'll be willing to listen. But first and foremost, you can only really respect them if you look for the good in them. And there's definitely something of good, something of value in each one. Aggressive journalists, what's the best way to handle them? I've had my fair share of having to deal with that. And the first lesson in this was in the 80s when I'd done lots and lots of radio interviews right from the 70s onwards. 60s, in fact, the end of the 60s. But this particular one stands out. It was a radio station in Texas, and from the very first question that he started, I thought, what am I going to do? And I decided I would go very deeply inside and keep my voice very, very calm. And that's what I did. His questions got more and more and more aggressive. I'd forgotten that I was in the Bible thumping belt of the USA, but this is basically what he was doing. Then after about 10-15 minutes of this, he said to me, "Sister, do you know what I'm going to do now? I'm going to open up the telephone lines and ask our listeners to put their questions. But you know what that means? I'm throwing you to the crocodiles." He actually said that. And I mean, there could be no more worse than what he'd said. So it's okay. And so another 10-15 minutes of that continues. And I just keep the tone of my voice very stable. And I keep myself very centered. And 25 minutes, and I leave, and I get back to the center, and they're absolutely stunned how I've survived. And they were trying to phone in with their questions, but all the positive questions were being blocked, and all the negative questions were getting through. Because there was a bank of operators, and so they were monitoring. They would ask, what is the question you have? And they just keep somebody waiting online if it was a positive question, and the other crocodiles got through. And next day I left, and I didn't know, but then they phoned me, wherever it is that I'd gone, and they said that the next day it was also, the show was open to listeners, and people, it was a very popular show, because this was his method of attracting viewers, listeners, his radio show listeners. He would attack, and he would get a response from people usually. And so it was a very exciting, high adrenaline show to listen. And so he had lots of listeners. But the next day, that day, people were too stunned to do anything. The next day, people were phoning in, and those calls were then being aired. Why were you so aggressive for that nice lady? and his comment to them was, to make the show interesting for you. But he had a lot of pain that he was carrying, and so it got manifested in that. So just stay cool, stay peaceful, and it'll be fine. There's so much change around now, luckily for the better. I'm glad you see it that way. So how can we support this change? I think that the positive change that's happening within everything that's going on is that people are realizing that the crisis is a crisis of values. And so let me focus on what my own values are and be true to those and use those in my life. And so I think that that's one word that's coming up a great deal, that it's the economic crisis is not a financial crisis, it's a crisis of values. The climate change crisis is not just climate, but again, it's a crisis of ethics, of values. And so let me focus on those. I wonder why things are dealt with on the surface instead of being solved deeply. I think it's because people don't have the patience to look for what is the underlying cause. It's like health. You want to take a quick tablet to resolve something, instead of actually going the long way round and asking, well, what was the cause of this? Rather than treating the symptoms, let me treat the cause, so that then it's a situation in which I become healthy rather than just be dependent on tablets. So it takes longer time, A, to identify what the cause is, and then B, to be able to treat that. And today's world is too busy to have the patience to do that. When things are not as they should be, do we give our opinion or keep it with ourselves and let things happen in their own good time? It's only useful to speak when there's a situation in which you're going to be heard. Otherwise, it's a waste of your energy. If it's an atmosphere of such negativity that people aren't going to listen to anything about peace, just give good vibrations at that time. And the right moment will come when you'll be able to talk about peace. So those were 99% of the questions. One or two that I didn't touch on. So it's great to have you all here. Any question that you have? Got just a few more minutes in case there's something that anybody wants to say, a comment or a question. Silence?
What do you do when you say that you speak with God? When you say that you have a conversation with God, what exactly is that?
In meditation or out of meditation, what I'm doing is creating the right thoughts. So firstly, in meditation, I'm creating thoughts about the self. And then I'm coming to that state of peace and stability in which I can feel the presence of God. And then I can start a conversation with God, talking to God as my mother, my father, my teacher. And it's not just a rush of thoughts in my mind, but there's a thought, and then there's a pause. And the pauses between the thoughts become longer and longer. So there's a space for silence in which you can also get the response. And so in meditation, talking to God is the communication in silence. And then through the day, just as there'd be a running commentary in your mind, and when something happens, you think, I should phone so-and-so and talk to them about it. Well, try switching it around. And instead of the thought coming, well, let me phone somebody and talk to them about it, let me literally have that conversation with God and allow God to be my friend, so that I'm able to take that support, I'm able to take that love and companionship. But also, through that conversation through the day, I can allow God to be my guide, so that when there's a decision to be made, I let myself be quiet and then have a conversation, and then come to the decision of what it is I need to do. These are two different ways. One last question. Content? Yes? Okay. Om Shanti.